Cyclone Garance rapidly strengthens as it makes way towards Réunion. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for February 27. So we still have a very active tropics right now, code orange, but the main headline is Cyclone Garance. You'll notice a bit of a format change there because we've had so many issues with the bulletin format lately, mainly the time it takes to process everything, so we've simplified it for now, for the time being at least. Also a category 2 is Alfred out there in the Coral Sea, still watching that for potential Australian impacts. In the Atlantic, 94 days until hurricane season, and I'm happy to tell you that it is a very quiet basin with one or two non-tropical frontal systems really crossing over the basin right now. Well, in the Eastern Pacific, really it's just reduced to a few clouds with a big low pressure system much further towards the north above my head there, well to the north of Hawaii. 78 days until hurricane season. In the Western Pacific, we're still looking at not too much, but there is a broad disturbance there out over the Micronesian Islands towards the Mariana Islands as well, and one or two local thunderstorms along the eastern coast of Mindanao in the Philippines. The North Indian Ocean is quiet with a few thunderstorms there off the southern tip of Sri Lanka and a few other cloudy areas towards the northern tip of Sumatra, Indonesia. The Arabian Sea is very quiet indeed, very clear. So all the action, of course, again in the southern hemisphere. Honde as well, a high-end tropical storm getting close to hurricane equivalent status 2 as it approaches southern Madagascar. Could be a massive rain threat there. Class 3 warnings in effect for Mauritius and a cyclone warning for Réunion for Cyclone Garance. We'll cover that shortly. Alfred there in the Australian region. What's left of Bianca, well off the coast of Western Australia, but still watching Alfred closely. And Seru, which is weakening now down to 50 miles per hour. Could actually stall a little bit now along the very southernmost islands of Vanuatu. So here's checking in with the main feature, Cyclone Garance. Class 3 warnings in effect for Mauritius, and as you can see it is now getting relatively close. 244 kilometers from Tromelin and moving further away. 322 from St. Denis, Réunion, and getting closer. 334 from St. Paul. 342 from Grand Bay, Mauritius, and the 348 from the main city, of course, Port Louis. Well, the storm is intensifying quite rapidly and could strengthen quite a bit further before poor conditions take its toll on the storm. So here's a wide shot of both cyclones right now in the southwest Indian Ocean, and you can clearly see the size difference between both of them as well as the structural differences. Garance, of course, being a much smaller system, and this show of intensification can obviously really blow up much more rapidly than the much larger Honde towards the southwest. Nonetheless, both of them are doing pretty well. Honde will be dropping tons of rainfall over Madagascar. Now, this is a look at Alfred on the left-hand side there as well, and Seru on the right-hand side there near the southernmost islands of Vanuatu. Alfred is looking good as well. We'll cut to that in a moment. But first of all, this is a Garance which is the biggest threat around the world right now. And you can see how close it is starting to get to the Mascarene Islands. On the very bottom of the frame you can see Mauritius and Réunion. There's been some showers over the course of the last 24 hours over the islands, but the real stuff is on its way. Will probably arrive during the course of today, Thursday. It will start to turn southwards. We don't know exactly when or if that turn has started yet, but the longer it leaves it, it does leave out more risk that potentially that it will adversely affect Mauritius more than expected. Here is some of that radar imagery, a few showers reaching Mauritius, but the big bulk of the storm still on its way. This is a look at Honde right now, as you can see, looking pretty decent. It's wrapping up a very large eye feature, and that will be a fully formed eye pretty soon, I should imagine. It looks like it's going to be a massive storm in comparison as we look at this satellite imagery. It's all at the same resolution. Latest frames there is a gap, northeastern side, turning towards the eastern side now. Some decent convection on that southern side, only pretty ropey on the northwestern side. Now this is Bianca, what's left of it, well off the western coast of Australia. Really not much to tell you about that one now. This is Alfred, which of course has been a massive machine in terms of producing very high cloud tops, and the energy is still very much there as well, if anything even more in terms of its aerial coverage of these cloud tops. Southern side is struggling a little bit, it's fighting off, I don't know if it's dry air or if it's still wind shear, probably wind shear looking at the eastern side, but look at some of those convective cloud tops, really high cloud tops into the -90s at times, and that little core there at the very end of that loop looks like it's trying to get an eye properly going now. Here's the latest imagery of Seru off the coast of Vanuatu, which is not looking so good now, losing strength, hasn't got much of it left, and I imagine that will be a post-tropical cyclone relatively soon. This is what's left of Ray, the other tropical cyclone that was active. We had 6 at a time, by the way, at one point. And there it is now, what's left of it. This is the Atlantic Ocean, moving off the US East Coast. You know, look at that little frontal system again, and some cloud cover over the Midwestern United States. And this is a look at the Eastern Pacific, a very weak little cyclonic looking thing down there, which is basically just a few clouds strung together, nothing of note. Western Pacific, a few little areas of disturbed weather, but nothing too much to mention. A little area of low cloud, patchy low cloud moving off the coast of China. A close-up view from the perspective of Mauritius and Réunion as we watch Cyclone Garance close in here on this latest imagery. Again, looking very impressive in those latest frames. Look at how that eye is popping out. By the time this update goes out, there may be a couple more new frames which might have the storm looking even better. Well, sea surface temperatures in the Atlantic are holding on near their annual minimums. Obviously at this time of year it is right in the middle of that lull. Still good temperatures in parts of the Caribbean though. Western Pacific there in parts of the region here near Palau and towards Yap, temperatures still holding around 28 or 29 degrees Celsius, similar to across a lot of the Micronesian islands. Southwestern Indian Ocean, of course, where these two cyclones are, it's pushing close to 30 degrees Celsius. For Honde, though, it is a little bit cooler, around 27 degrees, and that will remain the case generally. And off the coast of Australia, still tons of real estate there for storms to make themselves known, with very high heat content there off the coast of almost all of northern Australia. For Alfred, temperatures right now probably around 28 degrees Celsius. And this is how it looks compared to average, and you can see the La Nina effect still there a little bit in the Central Pacific, but is on its way out. It's getting very warm and toasty now in the eastern part of the Pacific there in the equatorial areas, possibly the harbinger of an incoming El Nino, or at least a warm neutral. Warmer than average for where Garance is right now, as well as Alfred, up to 2 or maybe 3 degrees above. Oceanic heat content is looking good as well across parts of the Western Pacific already at this early part of the year. It never really simmers down over there, but obviously you do need the systems to actually take advantage of those conditions. And looking towards the South Pacific, you can see quite a bit of energy there around the eastern coast of Australia, Coral Sea, towards Vanuatu and Fiji. And if anyone's wondering why we never have imagery for the Indian Ocean on these, it's because the NOAA agency that does this doesn't actually produce those graphics, sadly. But I imagine there's plenty more heat energy down where these systems are. So this is a GFS computer model out to 5 days. Both of these systems affecting land, of course, as we've been telling you. Garance very quickly in the next probably 24 hours, sweeping southwards, still calling for a landfall on Réunion Island. Watch once again here, probably a bit more than 24 hours actually there, maybe just slightly, and then continuing southwards after that. Potentially powerful landfall of at least 100 mph winds, and then of course Honde holding out there for a while too along the southwestern part of Madagascar, dropping huge amounts of rain. Now this is Alfred, watching that one moving southeasterly at first, and then it's struggling to make its mind up exactly what it's going to do. Now models did shift back out to sea in more recent runs, except near the very end of the run where the GFS now has just beyond the day 5 period, so it misses out the Mackay region now, and instead might try and take aim not too far from Brisbane, just towards the north there. That's going to be very interesting to watch. Now, looking at rainfall expectations for the southwest Indian Ocean region, you can see both of these storms producing huge amounts of rain where they are, and still quite high amounts over Réunion Island as well as over southwestern Madagascar. Huge amounts, projecting there nearly 40 inches of rainfall. That is 1,000 millimeters. And over parts of Réunion there, quarter of that, 250 millimeters, maybe a little bit higher. And Mauritius looking quite low at the minute at less than 50 millimeters, but be on your guard. If it does continue to move east of forecast, it could bring much higher totals to you. Now, medium range, day 5 to 10, we're looking at another little system there. We haven't marked it yet for potential development, but perhaps something to watch out for next week after we've gone through everything that's already going on now. Another small system there trying to take aim towards Mauritius, eventually passes northwards, hurricane equivalent there, and eventually a landfall in Madagascar. Maybe a third system forming behind that as well, certainly trying to at the end of that 10-day loop. Now, this is what happens to Alfred. There it is, actually turning northwest at the end there, moving over Fraser Island and then moving back inland towards the southwest. Eventually dies off by the looks of things, although maybe a remnant of its band, really bringing some strong winds down through New South Wales, including Sydney. But that initial landfall, a very odd track if that was to take place. Breathless stuff. Scan the barcode and that will take you through to the 413 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items right now, as well as our full season and individual storm animations on request. This is Tropical Weather Bulletin number 997. We're so close to that milestone of 1,000 Tropical Weather Bulletins, and if you were to watch them all back to back, it will probably take you about 7 days. This is the very long range, looking at the southwest Indian Ocean for that other system later on, and look how strong that one gets as well. So if this is anything to go by, even into mid-March now, obviously still very high season, but again, another massive system potentially affecting this region, but obviously very far out, so it is speculative, and another big system trying to form to its east as well out over the open waters. Crazy stuff. Well, let's go back on this day 21 years ago, February 27th, 2004. Yes, it is that long now. Cyclone Ivy was at category 3, near its peak on this day. There's a picture of it, moving towards the southeast, was clearing Vanuatu at this point. And we also had Tropical Storm Monty prior to its big peak, just before it struck Western Australia, in its early stages there along the coastline near the Pilbara region. And there was an upcoming tropical depression that was about to form as well in the Gulf of Carpentaria, slotted in between the two of those cyclones on this day in that year. Well, back to today then. We are code orange, 18 storms so far around the world, named and unnamed. In the Atlantic, the first name of this year's list will be Andrea. In the Eastern Pacific, it's Alvin, and in the Central Pacific, it will be Iona. In the Western Pacific, next up is Wutip, and in the North Indian Ocean, it will be Shakti. And of course, we've not seen any activity yet in the Northern Hemisphere, not too uncommon at this fairly early stage, but sometimes you do get the odd storm or two. In the Australian region, the next name is Courtney. In the Southwest Indian Ocean now, it's Yvonne, and in the South Pacific, it will be Tam. That's all for the Nice Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.